When Greg and I first moved into our home in Willow Creek, it felt like a dream come true. The neighborhood was picture perfect. Rows of charming houses with neatly trimmed lawns, flower beds bursting with color, and streets so quiet you could hear the wind rustling through the trees. Our house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, with a backyard that stretched farther than most others on the block. It ended near a small cluster of trees that gave the space a magical, almost private feel. For me, those trees were more than just scenery. They were my little escape from the world. Every morning, I'd grab a cup of coffee and head outside to sit under the shade of those towering oaks. Sometimes I'd bring a book or just sit there listening to the birds chirp. It was peaceful, serene, and completely mine. Or so I thought. That illusion shattered one Saturday morning when Patricia Hargrove decided to make her presence known. Patricia lived next door, but she wasn't your typical neighborly type. She was what some might call entitled, always sticking her nose where it didn't belong. That particular morning, I was pruning some overgrown bushes near the edge of our property, close to the tree line. I didn't think anything of it. It was routine maintenance. But then I heard her voice cutting through the calm like nails on a chalkboard. "What do you think you're doing?" she barked, storming toward me with her phone already in hand. Her face was twisted into an expression of pure indignation, as if I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I looked up, startled. "What does it look like?" "I'm trimming these bushes. That's private property," she snapped, pointing dramatically at the ground beneath my feet. "You can't just go around trespassing wherever you please." I blinked at her, confused. "Trespassing? Patricia, this is my asterisk land. I'm not trespassing." She crossed her arms, glaring at me like I'd insulted her personally. "Oh, really? Prove it." Her tone caught me off guard. How dare she question something that had been part of our property since we bought the house? I knew the boundaries of our lot well enough. We'd even walked them with the real estate agent during the purchase process. Still, Patricia's accusation left me feeling uneasy. Why was she acting like she owned this patch of earth? Before I could respond, she whipped out her phone and dialed 911. Yes, you read that right. She called the police because I was standing on my own property. As I watched her pace back and forth, talking loudly into her phone, I couldn't believe what was happening. Was this woman serious? Did she honestly think she could bully me into backing down? By the time 2 officers arrived, I was fuming. They listened patiently as Patricia ranted about trespassing and property lines, pointing wildly at the trees as if they held some secret evidence. Then they turned to me, asking for my side of the story. Thankfully, I had the deed to our home inside. It clearly outlined the boundaries of our lot, including the disputed area. The officers reviewed the document, nodded, and politely informed Patricia that she was mistaken. "You might want to double-check your facts before calling us again," one of them said, his tone firm but professional. Patricia's face turned bright red, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she shot me a glare that could freeze fire and stormed back to her house. As I stood there, still holding my gardening shears, I realized this wasn't going to be the last of it. Patricia wasn't the kind of person to let things go easily. And deep down, I couldn't help but wonder, why was she so obsessed with my land? What made her so sure it wasn't mine? Whatever the reason, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The moment the police officers left, I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of unease. Patricia had crossed a line, and not just by calling the authorities over something so trivial. It was the way she carried herself, as if she believed she was untouchable, that really got under my skin. She didn't even apologize or admit she was wrong. Instead, she retreated into her house like a wounded animal, slamming her door shut with enough force to rattle the windows. I tried to shake it off and focus on finishing my gardening, but my hands were trembling too much to hold the pruning shears steady. Greg found me sitting on the porch a few minutes later, staring blankly at Patricia's house. "What happened?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "She called the cops," I said flatly, still trying to process everything. "On *me*, for standing in our own backyard." Greg's jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." I recounted the entire incident, the accusation, the phone call, the officers showing up, and watched as Greg's expression shifted from shock to anger. "This is insane," he muttered. "Who does that? Who calls the police because someone trims their bushes?" "That's exactly what I want to know," I replied, my frustration bubbling over. "Why is she so obsessed with this piece of land? And how could she possibly think it's hers?" Greg didn't have an answer, but his silence spoke volumes. We both knew this wasn't normal behavior. Something about Patricia's outburst felt calculated, almost like she was testing me, or maybe trying to intimidate me. But why? What did she stand to gain? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Patricia's smug face, heard her shrill voice accusing me of trespassing. It gnawed at me, not just because of how ridiculous the situation was, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her actions than met the eye. Maybe she genuinely believed the land belonged to her, or maybe she was hiding something. The next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If Patricia wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to let her bully me without getting answers first. I started by pulling out the deed to our property again, poring over every detail. The boundaries were crystal clear. The land extended all the way to the cluster of trees. There was no room for interpretation. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in the back of my mind. What if Patricia had some kind of documentation or loophole that made her think she had a claim? Or worse, what if she'd been involved in shady dealings before we moved here? I needed to dig deeper. Later that day, I ran into Marcy, our neighbor from across the street. She was walking her dog, Max, and waved when she saw me. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, noticing the tense look on my face. "I heard about what happened with Patricia yesterday." News traveled fast in Willow Creek, apparently. I sighed and told her the whole story, hoping she might have some insight. To my surprise, Marcy didn't seem shocked at all. In fact, she looked almost resigned. "Patricia's always been like that," Marcy said, shaking her head. "She thinks she runs this neighborhood. Did you know she used to work for the city planning department?" "No, I didn't," I replied, intrigued. "What happened? Why doesn't she work there anymore?" Marcy hesitated, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. "Let's just say she had issues following rules. Rumor has it she got fired for misusing funds or something like that. No one talks about it much, though. She keeps to herself now, but she's still got that attitude like she's better than everyone else." Her words sent a chill down my spine. If Patricia had insider knowledge about property lines, or thought she did, maybe she believed she had leverage over me. But why would she care so much about a patch of trees? Was it pride? Revenge? Or was there something else lurking beneath the surface? As I walked back home, my mind racing with possibilities, I realized this wasn't just about proving ownership anymore. It was about standing up for myself and finding out exactly what Patricia was hiding. The more I thought about Patricia's behavior, the more determined I became to get to the bottom of it. If she was hiding something, I wanted to know what it was. And if she truly believed that patch of land near the trees wasn't mine, then I needed proof to shut her down once and for all. So the very next day, I took action. First, I called a professional surveyor. It wasn't cheap, but I figured spending a little money now would save me a lot of headaches later. The surveyor arrived early in the morning, armed with his equipment and a clipboard. He walked the perimeter of our property, taking measurements and marking stakes along the boundary lines. While he worked, I kept glancing over at Patricia's house, half expecting her to burst out and start yelling again. But her curtains stayed drawn, and the only movement came from her cat lounging on the porch railing. By late afternoon, the surveyor had finished his work. He handed me a detailed map showing exactly where our property began and ended, As I'd suspected, the disputed area, including the trees, was firmly within our boundaries. "There's no question about it," he said confidently. "This is your land." Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Having the facts on paper was one thing. Dealing with Patricia was another entirely. She wasn't the type to back down easily, especially when she was proven wrong. Still, I felt a surge of confidence knowing I had concrete evidence to support my claim. Later that evening, I decided to talk to some of the other neighbors. Maybe someone else had dealt with Patricia's antics before. Marcy had already given me a glimpse into Patricia's past, but I wanted to hear more. I started with Mr. Thompson, an older gentleman who lived 2 doors down. He was sitting on his front porch, sipping lemonade when I approached him. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," I said casually. "Got a minute?" He nodded and gestured for me to sit. "Sure thing. What's on your mind?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to phrase my question without sounding too nosy. "Well, have you ever had any issues with Patricia Hargrove? She seems, pretty particular about things around here." Mr. Thompson chuckled, setting his glass down. "Particular is putting it mildly. That woman's been stirring up trouble since the day she moved in. Last year, she accused Mrs. Dawson of planting flowers that were too bright for the neighborhood. Can you believe that?" I shook my head, stunned. "No way." "Oh, it gets better," he continued. "A few months ago, she tried to convince the HOA to ban backyard sheds because she said they ruined the aesthetic harmony. Thankfully, no one went along with it, but it shows you how far she'll go to control everyone else." As I listened, a pattern began to emerge. Patricia wasn't just overly protective of her own property. She seemed obsessed with controlling the entire neighborhood. Whether it was enforcing imaginary rules or picking fights over trivial matters, she thrived on drama. And yet, despite her loud protests, most people simply ignored her. Why then had she singled me out? I thanked Mr. Thompson and headed home, my thoughts swirling. Everyone agreed that Patricia was difficult, even unreasonable, but none of them had experienced anything quite like what I was going through. Her fixation on my land felt personal, almost vindictive. Was it possible she had a history with the previous owners? Or maybe she'd been eyeing that stretch of trees for years, waiting for an opportunity to claim it as her own. That night, Greg and I sat at the kitchen table, discussing everything I'd learned. "She's clearly got some kind of vendetta against you," Greg said, frowning. "But why now? Why pick this fight after all these years?" "I don't know," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "But I'm not backing down. Tomorrow, I'm going to confront her, with the survey results and everything else." Greg raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure that's a good idea? What if she flips out again?" "She can flip out all she wants," I replied firmly. "At this point, I just want answers. If she thinks she can intimidate me into giving up my property, she's dead wrong." Little did I know, confronting Patricia would lead to revelations I never saw coming. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Confronting Patricia wasn't something I was looking forward to, but I knew it had to be done. Armed with the surveyor's report and a fresh determination, I marched over to her house. My heart pounded as I knocked on her door, half expecting her to ignore me or slam the door in my face. But after a few tense seconds, she opened it, her expression unreadable. "What do you want?" she asked curtly, crossing her arms. "I'm here to clear things up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've been accusing me of trespassing on land that doesn't belong to you." Well, I hired a professional surveyor, and they confirmed what I already knew. "This is my property." I held out the surveyor's report, letting her see the official stamp and detailed map. For a moment, she just stared at it, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, without a word, she snatched the papers from my hand and began scanning them. Her eyes darted back and forth, growing wider with each passing second. This can't be right," she muttered under her breath, though there was no conviction in her tone. She flipped through the pages again, as if hoping to find some loophole or error. "It's right," I said firmly. "Every inch of that land belongs to us." "You were wrong, Patricia." Her face flushed red, and for a split second, I thought she might explode. Instead, she let out a long, shaky sigh and handed the papers back to me. "Fine," she snapped, her voice dripping with bitterness. "You win." I blinked, caught off guard by how quickly she'd backed down. This wasn't the fiery, combative Patricia I'd come to expect. Something about her reaction felt off. It was almost like she'd been expecting this outcome all along. Before I could press her further, she added quietly, "Just wait. Karma always comes around." Her words sent a chill down my spine. What did she mean by that? Was it a threat? A warning? Or just another attempt to rattle me? I didn't have time to ask before she turned and shut the door, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. As I walked back home, I replayed the conversation in my head. Patricia's sudden surrender didn't sit right with me. If she truly believed the land was hers, or even if she'd been bluffing, why give up so easily? And what did she mean by karma? Was she implying that I had something to worry about? When I told Greg about the encounter later that evening, he shared my unease. "That was weird," he said, frowning. "She didn't put up much of a fight, did she?" "No, she didn't," I replied, pacing the living room. And that karma comment, it felt like she was trying to scare me. Greg hesitated, then shrugged. "Maybe she's just bitter. People say strange things when they're cornered." "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't convinced. Something about Patricia's demeanor lingered in my mind, gnawing at me like an unsolved puzzle. Over the next few days, I kept an eye on her house, half expecting her to retaliate in some way. But Patricia stayed quiet, keeping to herself more than usual. Her car remained parked in the driveway, and aside from the occasional glimpse of her through the window, she seemed to vanish from the neighborhood altogether. At first, I thought I'd won. For good. The tension between us had lifted, and life in Willow Creek returned to its usual rhythm. Neighbors waved hello again, and the air felt lighter, freer. Even Greg noticed the change. "See, everything's fine now," he said one evening as we sat outside. "Patricia's probably realized she can't bully everyone into doing what she wants." But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Patricia's parting words echoed in my mind, haunting me like a shadow I couldn't escape. "Karma," she'd said. "Just wait." And then, a week later, everything changed. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Marcy called me, her voice trembling with excitement, or maybe fear. "You won't believe this," she said breathlessly. "Patricia lost her job." I froze, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. "What do you mean? What job?" "The one she's been working remotely for," Marcy explained. "Apparently, someone reported her for embezzling funds from her old position at the city planning department. They finally caught up with her, and now she's out of work." My stomach twisted into knots. Embezzlement. That was a serious accusation, and while I didn't know all the details, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Patricia had always carried herself like someone who thought rules didn't apply to her. Maybe this was why. "Do you think?" I trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Marcy hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Could be coincidence, but it feels like karma biting back, doesn't it?" Karma. The word sent a shiver down my spine. It was the same thing Patricia had said to me during our confrontation. "Just wait. Karma always comes around." At the time, I'd assumed she was trying to intimidate me, but now it felt eerily prophetic. Had her own actions finally caught up with her? Over the next few days, whispers spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who had once avoided Patricia began talking openly about her downfall. Mr. Thompson mentioned that he'd heard rumors about her misdeeds years ago, but never thought anything would come of it. Even Susan Langley, the HOA president, seemed unusually subdued, as if she were distancing herself from Patricia entirely. Then, one morning, I noticed movers pulling up to Patricia's house. Boxes were loaded into a truck, furniture wrapped in protective sheets, and within hours, the place looked empty. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even Marcy, who tried knocking on her door to see if she was okay. By evening, Patricia and her cat were gone, leaving behind only silence. At first, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief because the tension she brought to the neighborhood seemed to vanish overnight. Guilt because, deep down, I wondered if I'd played a role in her unraveling. After all, I confronted her with evidence she couldn't deny. Had that pushed her over the edge? Or was this inevitable, the result of years of poor choices catching up with her? Greg noticed my unease one night as we sat outside under the stars. "You're thinking about Patricia again, aren't you?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Yeah, I mean, good riddance, right? But it's weird. She acted like she had everything under control. And then suddenly, poof, she's gone." "She brought it on herself," Greg said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You stood your ground. And that's what matters." He was right, of course. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Patricia's sudden disappearance left too many questions unanswered. Why had she fixated on my land so intensely? And what did she mean by warning me about karma? As much as I wanted to move on, those lingering doubts kept creeping back into my mind. Life in Willow Creek gradually returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be without Patricia lurking around. Neighbors who had previously kept to themselves started reaching out, forming connections I hadn't expected. Even Susan Langley seemed less intimidating now that her biggest ally was gone. For the first time since moving here, I felt like part of a real community. But despite the newfound peace, I couldn't fully relax. Every time I stepped into my backyard, especially near the tree line, I half expected Patricia to reappear, accusing me of some new imagined crime. It was irrational, I knew, but the memory of her venomous glare lingered, casting a shadow over my sense of victory. And then, just when I thought I'd put the whole ordeal behind me, something arrived in the mail. A single sheet of paper that made my blood run cold. It was an ordinary Thursday morning when the letter arrived. I didn't think much of it at first. It looked like any other piece of mail, a plain white envelope with my name scrawled in shaky handwriting. The postmark indicated it had come from a town several states away, which struck me as odd since I didn't know anyone who lived that far. Curious, I tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was short, but every word hit me like a punch to the gut. Asterisk, you may have won the battle, but remember this: everyone has secrets, including you. Asterisk. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was unmistakable, Patricia's. My hands trembled as I read the note again, trying to make sense of it. What did she mean by secrets? Was this another attempt to unsettle me? Or was she hinting at something deeper, something she thought she knew about me? I called Greg into the kitchen, my voice shaking as I showed him the letter. His face darkened as he read it. "What is this supposed to mean?" he asked, his tone sharp with frustration. "Does she really think she can scare you after everything she's done?" "I don't know," I admitted, pacing back and forth. "But it feels personal, like she's accusing me of something." Greg frowned. "Do you think she's bluffing? Trying to get under your skin?" "Maybe," I said, though I wasn't convinced. There was something deliberate about her choice of words. Asterisk, everyone has secrets, asterisk. It wasn't just a random threat. It was calculated, almost like she was taunting me. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I closed my eyes, Patricia's smug face flashed in my mind, her voice echoing those chilling words. Who was she to judge me? What gave her the right to insinuate that I had something to hide? That evening, I decided to call Marcy. She'd always been the neighborhood's unofficial gossip hub, and if anyone knew more about Patricia's past, or mine, it would be her. When I told her about the letter, she sounded as shocked as I felt. "That doesn't sound like a coincidence," Marcy said cautiously. Patricia must have been planning this before she left. But why bring up secrets? What could she possibly know about you? I don't know, I replied, rubbing my temples. And that's what scares me. What if she dug into my background, or found something she thinks she can use against me? Marcy hesitated. Look, I'm sure it's nothing. Patricia's probably just trying to mess with your head because she lost. Don't let her win by letting this bother you. Her words were meant to comfort me, but they only made me feel worse. What if it wasn't nothing? What if Patricia had uncovered something, even something small, that could ruin the life Greg and I had built here? The uncertainty gnawed at me, keeping me awake long after Greg had fallen asleep. The next morning, I sat outside under the trees, staring at the note again. The peaceful sanctuary I once cherished now felt tainted, like Patricia's shadow still lingered over it. I tried to remind myself that I'd done nothing wrong, that whatever game she was playing wasn't worth losing sleep over. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished with me yet. As the days passed, the letter became a constant presence in my mind. I tucked it away in a drawer, hoping to forget about it, but it haunted me like an unanswered question. Patricia might have left Willow Creek, but her parting shot had planted a seed of doubt, one that refused to die. And then, one quiet evening, I received another unexpected visitor. Someone knocked on my door, and when I opened it, I froze. Standing there was a man I vaguely recognized, a former colleague from years ago. He smiled faintly, holding out an envelope. "Thought you should see this," he said cryptically before turning and walking away. My heart sank as I stared at the envelope in my hand. Whatever piece I'd fought so hard for suddenly felt fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. I stood there on the porch, staring at the envelope in my trembling hands. The man who delivered it was already halfway down the street, his figure disappearing into the evening shadows. My mind raced with questions. Who was he? What did he mean by, "You should see this"? And most importantly, what was inside? Greg appeared behind me, concern etched across his face. "Who was that?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. I'm not sure," I stammered, still frozen in place. He gave me this. We went inside, and I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded document, a photocopy of an old newspaper article. The headline leaped out at me: "Local employee fired for misconduct amid financial scandal." My stomach dropped as I scanned the text. It detailed an incident from years ago when I worked at a small marketing firm. A coworker had accused me of taking credit for their ideas during a major project, leading to accusations of professional misconduct. I remembered that time vividly. It had been a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by office politics. I'd eventually cleared my name, but the damage to my reputation lingered for months. The article included quotes from people I barely recognized and exaggerated claims I knew weren't true. Yet here it was, dredged up like some long-buried skeleton. As I read further, dread settled in my chest. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note in shaky handwriting. "Thought you'd want to know, someone's been asking about this." Patricia's influence loomed large in my mind. Had she somehow tracked down this article? Was this her idea of revenge, exposing old wounds to make me feel vulnerable? Or worse, was she planning to spread it around Willow Creek? Greg noticed the color draining from my face. "What is it?" he asked gently, pulling up a chair beside me. When I showed him the article, his expression hardened. "This is ridiculous," he said firmly. "That was years ago, and you handled it. Whoever's trying to stir things up is just being cruel." But cruelty wasn't the only thing worrying me. If Patricia, or anyone else, decided to share this with the neighbors, how would they react? Would they judge me based on an outdated story? Would they question whether I belonged here? For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt truly exposed. The perfect facade I'd tried so hard to maintain, the friendly neighbor, the responsible homeowner, felt like it could crumble at any moment, all because of something I thought I'd left far behind. Over the next few days, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every knock on the door made my heart race. Every casual conversation with a neighbor left me second-guessing their intentions. But nothing happened. No whispers, no rumors, no signs that anyone else had seen the article. Still, the unease lingered. One evening, as Greg and I sat outside under the stars, I finally broke the silence. "What if she tells people?" I asked quietly. "What if they find out and decide I'm not good enough?" Greg took my hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "Listen to me," he said. "You are good enough. This neighborhood loves you because of who you are, not because of some perfect image you've created. And if anyone has a problem with your past, then that's their issue, not yours." His words brought tears to my eyes, but they also gave me strength. He was right. I couldn't control what Patricia or anyone else might do, but I could control how I responded. I could choose to let fear rule me, or I could stand tall and remind myself that everyone has chapters in their life they'd rather forget. That didn't define me. A week later, I received another letter. This one was shorter, almost dismissive. "Consider us even." It was signed with Patricia's initials. Whether it was meant as a truce or a final jab, I couldn't tell. But this time, I didn't let it shake me. Instead, I burned the letter in our fireplace, watching the edges curl and blacken until it turned to ash. Patricia may have tried to unsettle me, but she hadn't won. Whatever secrets she thought she held over me, they didn't change the truth. I belonged in Willow Creek, and no amount of intimidation or karma was going to take that away from me.